Hello, and welcome back to this special edition of the ILEETA Learning Lab. My name is Joe Willis. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for ILEETA, and I'm here today with Mark Suchy. He's going to be at the 2026 ILEETA Conference and Expo talking about instructor development for low light operations. And this is an incredibly important topic. It applies in so many different domains that we operate in as professionals. And so without any further ado, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. I want to hear a little bit about what you're going to teach, but also kind of how this course came to be and what's different about it than perhaps an operator level low light course. So straight over to you, brother. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you. My name's Mark Suchy. I'm with Team One Network. Been with them for about 7 years, where I predominantly teach low light and distant matter optics. The low light class is intriguing because of, and the conference area is a really good tool and reference to showing what we do for our 3-day course. We get into having them evaluate their low light training program and hit heavy into how light affects the eye and the use of light and dark with building search techniques. Okay, incorporating the 8 lighting principles and also teaching them how to properly choose a flashlight for their patrol duties.
Awesome. And so you've been in the firearms instructor space for a long time, member of ILEETA and ILFE, and you've done a lot of this training. What is it about low light training when you look at it in the broader context? Why is it so important? And what do we need to be doing it for? I think you and I both implicitly know the answer. Many of our listeners do, but why is low light training so important?
Well, I mean, half the day is night. You're going to be working, on the night shift starting out, and regardless of the day shift guys, they still will be having to search dark buildings during the day. Students have to understand that it's not just turning a flashlight on and off. The flashlight is used as a distracting tool and the blind. And once they end up appreciating through training what the light does for them, to give them a tactical advantage, it changes their whole outlook on low light training. Before I ended up really getting into low light training, you just thought you were doing building searches, turning the light on, illuminating the area, and doing your building search techniques that you normally work during daylight hours. Utilizing the flashlights and the tactics completely change the environment and give the officers a huge advantage. So when they get that proper low light training, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've seen it over the years in our own progression, in our own professional development, where, I can't count the number of times early in my career where I thought a pen light was sufficient for lighting. And, once you start, coming into the space where you've got a good, powerful light, it changes everything from tactics, obviously, and how we dominate space and how we affect the people, good guys and bad guys that we interact with and how we communicate with it. But also just good building searches, good crime scene searches, good management of space. Lighting gives us a lot of advantages there. And so I know you go over lighting for more than just tactics. Let's kind of talk about what are some of the key aspects you teach, first of all, and how light affects the human eye, both from our perspective as an operator, but also in the ways that it affects the people we engage with.
Well, you see, that's where the part of the buy-in comes into play. We are, as humans, diurnal, meaning daytime people. We're not nocturnal like animals are. So when our eyes adjust from daytime to nighttime, meaning twilight, we have a chemical called rhodopsin in our eyes that saturates our eyes to give us our night vision. So when we're in daytime and we end up entering that twilight, it takes 20 to 40 minutes to end up having that full night saturation occur. That chemical rhodopsin can be bleached out instantaneously utilizing quality white bright light if it is quality white bright light. If you had ambient light in the room, it wouldn't affect the night saturation of the eyes. And it's not only what the light does to the bad guy's eye, it's what it does to the police officer's eye. And a part of the huge part of the buy-in doing the techniques is they have to know what it does to them. So when we break off in pairs and give them their own areas to end up practicing the techniques, it's not only to practice the techniques, it's to see what light looks like approaching the doorway and entering the room. So it's not on. You know, there's intermittent use, there's painting horizontally and vertically, and a combination of the two where we're trying to mix up patterns and not having anything rhythmic. So the bad guy does not know exactly where we are. Knows that there's someone there, but doesn't know exactly where we are. And this science of the bad guy having that full night saturation hiding from law enforcement gives us an advantage in reference to how we use that light to end up blinding and bleaching out that rhodopsin in their eyes. So again, when the officers end up actually utilizing these techniques and seeing what the light does to them, that is a huge buy-in, because they never looked at light that way. They just thought you turn it on, illuminate an area, and turn it off.
Yeah, and I mean that in itself is actually kind of a good tactical piece of advice, right? Turn it on, illuminate an area, turn it off. That kind of presents that good tactical advantage. There are a lot of things you teach as far as how to approach a doorway, when to turn the light on, where to turn the light on, different grips and carries that are taught. Can you kind of talk us through a little bit about what some of those tactics might be, and kind of give us an image of what you teach from the actual usage perspective of a flashlight?
So that's a unique question, because although there are 9 handheld flashlight techniques,
Thank you.
for actual building searches where the officer is actually searching the building, they really can't use most of those techniques. A single-handed technique is what they're going to need for the search, which is hard to understand because all these years that we've taught them two-handed techniques or supported techniques. Now, those are great, and they're all tools, and I'm not suggesting getting rid of anything, but we have to understand that you have to be able to flow in and out of single-handed, supported, and or two-hand techniques in reference to what you are doing. But the search techniques themselves, they can't be used well with two-handed techniques. So in our class, we end up going and demonstrating what basically the FBI technique. So we have the gun controlled safely at a 45-degree angle while we're end up utilizing these non-rhythmic patterns for searching to navigate and locate somebody within a building. Again, they know that someone's there. They just don't know where we are because of that non-rhythmic pattern with that with us coming down hallways and making entries into rooms. So
talk me through that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, talk me through that non-rhythmic pattern. I can see it in my mind, having been through the training and even taught a little bit of this in the past. But when you say that, what do you mean? And kind of verbally illustrate it for us, what you're talking about.
So hitting the flashlight on and off would be considered an intermittent use of light. Moving it from side to side horizontally, horizontal painting, and up and down would be vertical painting. A non-rhythmic pattern would be basically shaking that light and turning it on and turning it off, utilizing the lumens and candela in such a way in a non-rhythmic pattern that if you had somebody in a room that they know someone is approaching, but they have no idea how far this person is away.
Or how many.
That then you end up getting into quick peeks to be able to look into hard corners of corner-fed rooms and hallways to better give the officer a safer advantage to utilize that light, blind the subject, and be in and out of that room utilizing light in a specific way so we can see those hard corners and not put them in danger. Obviously, when we end up utilizing the light, we can end up hearing noise. We can hear movement. We could hear a gunshot. All that changes the dynamic, and that gives us an advantage. That changes how we're going to end up utilizing that light. When we know someone's there, then we would end up powering it on and calling them out. So again, it changes the search dynamic completely, but it gives us that advantage to end up calling in more people, more resources, and safely getting that person into custody.
Yeah, I love it. And I think there's this fun conversation to be had where a lot of folks, especially those who aren't familiar with the this perspective on training or what it is we do specifically, would think the old security guard, wandering a hall with a flashlight continuously on, kind of shining it around as they go, is sufficient enough. And then we could get tactical and fancy with it by turning it on and off and that sort of thing. But what you just illustrated there for us really illuminates, pun intended, the options that we have available when we're using a light smartly with that alternating kind of rhythmic or dysrhythmic sort of flashes with different painting techniques. And there's a lot that happens with our minds, if I'm correct, where if I paint a path, my mind can kind of remember that path and move through that in some way and kind of see what my obstacles are and that sort of thing. And so even once the light comes off, I can still continue to move with some memory of what was in that space. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and again, there's so many different uses of light, but when they end up seeing the techniques that are used, and then God forbid you end up changing where you were engaging, moving from that single-handed search to a supported or two-handed technique, if that's what you chose to do. But these techniques prove that you have to be well-versed in your single-handed manipulations and shooting, both strong and support hands. And the reason for that is the use of both sides of the doorway. And we can say that we're going to use that strong hand all the time, but when it comes down to it, you overexpose yourself. And these classes demonstrate that and expose that. That's why the isolation drills that we end up utilizing and suggest that you do, from just the search, identifying the person. You could end up having them hold props and or fingers up in reference to being able to verify those hard corners, and then finally airsoft. So all these things are big to end up teaching them to be able to utilize the techniques to safely look in those hard corners if we can before we make entry into the room.
Yeah, I want to ask you towards the end here about weapons mounted lights and some of that stuff, and do you cover that and that sort of thing? But before we get there, the training for low light operations, developing ourselves as professionals, tactical professionals in this space. I'm a firm believer that it doesn't only happen on the range. It doesn't only happen in training. Like you said, the reality is we are in the dark, or at least limited visibility, at least half of our shift, half of our day. And then for many, that's their entire shift. And for day shift folks, that's still every time you go into a building in a variety of other situations. So when is the right time to practice these skills? Over to you.
When is the right? I'm not saying.
When is the right time as an individual to practice using these techniques that I would use under a tactical situation, clearing a building with firearm, that sort of thing? I guess what I'm getting at here, Mark, not to put you on the spot, is how important is it to just practice this? I make sure that I hold my flashlight in my non-firing hand so that I have access to my gun. Pretty self-explanatory for most people, but the number of times I've seen people holding a flashlight in their gun hand because it's not a tactical situation kind of befuddles me. And so you probably see it all the time. So kind of talk me through, how important is it to build these skills while you're not under stressful situations?
Okay, well, it's dire. That's the answer. It's dire. And it should start right at the academy level. And I'm still at Palm Beach State College as an adjunct as well, and we're trying to enhance the program as best we can. But from that level, and as soon as you end up getting to the agency, we should be giving them more, because they're going to be working in dark situations. And as firearms instructors, we normally teach during daytime hours. So those students with a hard time with their firearm skills, we finally end up getting them to a average level, and then we end up saying, you got to end up taking this flashlight, putting it into your hand, which jacks up their grip, and you have to do just as well as you just did with completely well lit situation and what you're already comfortable doing. So that doesn't happen very easily. We have to give them the time to be able to work the reps, and then we can't do this during daylight. It's got to be in, or I mean, lighted conditions. It has to be in completely dark conditions, and also adding ambient light, because that's going to be the reality. That's never, not always are we going to have completely dark situations, and show how the strategic uses of light with us in that building, either completely dark or partially backlit, utilizing our lights properly. It's dire to get them to do these techniques and show them the right way from the start, and have them cultivate these techniques over a lifetime, or I should say a career time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I'm kind of seeing this natural formation of a training path here at ILEETA, because there's so many great classes being taught on uh, constraint-led approach, ecological dynamics, and all of those factors of uh, open environment learning, open chain learning, where the environment dictates how we perform, whether or not we even needed to have a gun in our hand initially and we're searching with a flashlight. And it's a self-correcting mistake when I grab my flashlight and I'm using my right hand and I'm right-handed and I know that's what I'm going to use to grab my gun. And now all of a sudden I have to do that. In training, that's a great learning experience to have. How could have I done it better, not having to change hands? Let's talk about that. And so I think there's a lot of great things that will happen at the conference between your class, where we're talking the techniques and really getting after the approaches. And I know when you teach it, it's a 3-day class normally, and you've got, is yours, I think it's a 4 hour, the 3 hour and 45-minute block. So you at least have half a day here, but that's still not enough to really get after some of the drills. So I know it's going to be like drinking through a fire hose. Let's talk quickly about gun mounted lights. At this point, Mark, what are you seeing out there as you're teaching this? Is pretty much everybody running some sort of light on their primary firearm?
Surprisingly, no. We still have agencies that don't have weapon mounted lights. Now, with that being said, it's again, it's another added tool. We should have them completely 100%, but we don't search with them. That is the last thing that we're going to end up searching with, because you can't point once the light goes on the gun, it's part of the weapon system. You can't point a gun at something you haven't deemed as a lethal threat. So that's where we get into, our high liability issues, and we have to teach them the right way. So with that being said, regardless whether, I get questioned all the time, well, I have a light on my gun, why do I have to learn these handheld techniques? And it again, you can't point at anything that you haven't deemed as a lethal threat. So even with the light on the gun, we're still utilizing these handheld techniques for our searches. That doesn't change, period. You can't use that light on the gun and do the same quality techniques that you would be able to do with the handheld. And sometimes people, they scratch their head, but they haven't gone through the class and they don't know what we're talking about. If I end up doing the same techniques for search with single hand, with two hands, you're moving the muzzle all over the place, and it can't be done. So once we end up getting into that, we demonstrate that. So again, just like optics, lights are nothing more than a tool. So they're great to have, and it's a supplemental use, but you will never, in my opinion, get rid of handheld flashlights for law enforcement, regardless what light systems that you have. They're so tactically needed It's just incredible the what you can do with a handheld flashlight. And since we got the weapon mounted lights, they look at as the weapon mounted light as the main light, and it's not.
I love that. And thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, the personal perspective, the purpose of the light mounted, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the purpose of the light mounted on the firearm is to illuminate a target for better target acquisition and
100%.
shooting. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And I think, as we have these conversations, it's evolved. I remember, the early days, people talking about illuminating driver's license with a firearm flashlight. I've never seen it, but I know the conversation has been out there. That's
It
not
still
happening.
happens.
Okay, it still happens. So that being said, I want to emphasize this, that this low light training is one of those things that, and we'll end kind of on this note here, and I'll turn it over to you for thoughts on it. Is that it starts with the most simple. You get unsecured building, suspicious activity call. It's your day shift, and you make entry into a space that is dimly lit. It's a good time to grab your flashlight and start practicing those techniques, even if the ambient light is sufficient enough to kind of search it well. It's a good time to train, and it's also great for safety. The progression from there becomes those more tactically demanding night shift environments, that sort of thing, where heart rate is up, stress levels are up, and you're practicing those techniques Mark was talking about. Finally, you've got to get into not only the flat range, but other shooting environments with a weapons mounted light to be able to effectively employ both handheld and weapons mounted lights. So, over to you, Mark. What can a training officer do, a low light instructor, firearms instructor at their agency right now to start improving their low light training program, regardless of whether or not they can make it to this conference, which, by the way, I hope you can. But if you can't, what's something they could start doing immediately to improve their program?
Start with isolation drills. Start
What do you mean by
small. So in reference to the search techniques, we have to show them what the light does to the person's eyes. So this training could go on for months. If you're doing patrol, that you got time. It's nothing but time. So you take it in small bites and you start showing them what light does to the eyes. Then place somebody in a room and show what light does within that room. Add more layers in reference to actually showing them how or what it looks like to start the jabs and the quick peeks to get into those hard corners. And then finally, you can end up getting into utilizing props once you end up going into that room and coming back out, utilizing the light, calling out it was a cell phone in your hand, or you were holding up 5 fingers, stuff like that, to end up pushing them further. And then the ultimate layer would be adding the some type of airsoft or simunitions. So that's going to be definitely a little bit more involved. But the reps that you can do, even from a patrol perspective, without going as far as airsoft, is a lot. All you need is the space, and meaning a room, hallway, and a dark environment. And then you can add the ambient light for, to change from completely dark to adding ambient light, using lanterns. But isolation drills is the key.
Awesome. Yep. Start small, build from there, and really get that learning to just kind of be natural to the environment. I see FTOs playing a huge role in this, even when flashlights aren't necessarily needed. And then, that natural tendency to walk in and flip on a light switch, the light doesn't work. I mean, there's so many great things that can happen there. Mark, thank you so much for spending the time with me today, talking through this. I know low light's one of those things that's easier and more effectively trained in person with a light in your hand and really getting after it. I think you did a great job today, kind of walking us through kind of some of the techniques. So,
what the only thing I have to add is we integrated.
Last words over to you anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
We integrated videos. So these conferences are they're a hard sell because you're talking about everything. We never have search areas, which is, that hurts the 3 hours and 45 minutes. With that being said, we ended up preparing videos that shows what light does to the eyes. So that is a huge difference, and everybody in the class can end up seeing. So we're maximizing time. that gives them the idea of, okay, you come to the 3-day, you know what you're going to end up getting involved in, versus talking about it doesn't do it. We're visual and we want to end up doing. So the videos that we ended up preparing really end up making the students understand, now I know what you're talking about, and that's really freaking cool. And I never thought this way about light before. And the one thing that you have to understand is when we're doing these videos is that the camera, just like your eye, adjusts way quicker than what the eye does. So when the camera is showing you the distorted light and how bad that affects, the human eye is going to end up reacting worse, meaning that you're not going to be able to recover as fast as a camera. So that is a big deal, a big deal.
Question for you. You may not know the answer to this. Is that something that you've kind of sent me on this research path now? And you know me when that happens. When if I train under these conditions and I backsplash myself with light off a light wall, or I get hit with light, is that something that I can adapt and become more resilient to over time? Can I get
No.
quicker at that? Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. And if you didn't know,
unfortunately, and age is against us. So it's one of those things. You're never in an environment that you know, or most of the time you're not in an environment you know. So they talk about having too many lumens or not. I want as many lumens as I possibly can, but picking the right light is important. So candela is going to be the issue in reference to how much lumens versus candela for building searches.
Can you do me a favor?
The highest of the high, it's not going to end up working. So,
explain, if you would, to the audience the difference between lumens and candela, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, lumens is the measurement of the entire output of a light, where candela measures that focused beam. So an example, because that's just talk. If I took a light and one light had a hotspot, so a hotspot is the center area, and it threw that hotspot the same size. If I ended up pointing the hotspot at the wall and it was about a foot in diameter at about 7 yards, and it took that foot in diameter beam and threw it 100 yards, 300 yards, condensed. That's candela, okay? The condensed portion of that light. Now, if we had a certain amount of lumens where the hotspot got bigger over that distance, I'm going to use the term floodier. It's more of like a floodlight. That is going to be less candela, okay? The important thing is to have a balance. You need a strong light with high lumens, and it's got to be floody to do building searches. If you had a direct light, so this light I'm talking about with the high candela, that would go 300 yards. Great for a rifle, great to put up to pin down a person who has a rifle, and you can end up blinding them from a long distance. But as a search use, maybe not as good, because we want a little bit more floodier light to end up throwing lumens down a larger area for hallways and rooms. So it's showing that officer there is a happy medium, and there are lights out there that will fit their need in reference to lumens versus candela and size. Size of the light's going to be huge because we want to be able to run the gun efficiently. Okay, we want to be able to run that gun as efficient as possible. And if we get too big of a light, I can run some pretty big lights, but I'm not going to choose them because I can't run the gun.
Makes sense.
As well.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, we're talking to you. Chances are you can still run it okay. Anyway, I'll just leave it with that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, man. I genuinely appreciate it. Do you mind sticking around? I got a couple other quick questions for you.
Sure.